Welcome to Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerb, and I have ADHD. On this podcast, I dig into the tools, tactics, and best practices to help you work with your ADHD brain. Hey team, this week we've got a really fun episode. I'm talking with Andy J. Pizza. That was weird. Let's try that again. Andy J. Pizza. All right, well, we'll just go with it. Andy is a podcaster, illustrator, and creative thinker who's built a career by embracing the parts of himself that used to feel like liabilities. Andy's the host of the Creative Pep Talk podcast, and his Right Side Out series dives into what happens when you stop trying to pass for neurotypical and start living a little bit more like yourself. It's a journey into what it was like for him discovering his ADHD and how he wanted to deal with that. Andy was diagnosed in his 20s, and his experience navigating masking, creative burnout, and his late-in-life self-acceptance forms the core of what we're going to be talking about today. In our conversation, we talk about the costs of masking, the weird middle ground between accommodation and authenticity, and the realization that sometimes we forget who we are because we've been just trying so hard to be someone else for so long. We also get into creative practice, novelty, and his favorite ADHD-friendly productivity hacks. And of course, we talk about what it means to live right side out and what it really means to show up authentically. This was definitely one of my favorite episodes I've recorded so far this year, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. If you'd like to follow along the show notes page, you can find that at hackingyyouradhd.com/221. This episode is brought to you by Freedom, but I'm not talking about the concept of freedom here. I'm talking about the Freedom app, used by over 3 million people around the world to stay focused and productive. Freedom.to, an app I've relied on for over a decade to tackle internet distractions head on. As an app featured in Apple's App Store as an editor's choice for top apps to support those with ADHD, this one really hits the mark. We've all found ourselves scrolling the web when we know we should be doing something else, be it social media, YouTube, or shopping. The distractions on the internet are endless, and with my impulsive ADHD habits, sometimes those sites get opened before I'm even thinking about it. That's where Freedom steps in. With just a few clicks, I can block distracting websites and apps across all my devices, ensuring that my focus stays on what I really want it to. Whether I'm working on a new podcast episode or deep diving into research, Freedom's comprehensive blocking capabilities let me tailor what I'm focused on. So, if you're looking to take control of your focus and boost your productivity, give Freedom a try. It's always available for free with basic features, but also has a premium subscription option which unlocks more advanced features like scheduling, locked mode, and unlimited sessions. Freedom is more than just an app. It's your partner in paving the way to a more focused and fulfilling work life. Check it out at freedom.to and discover what you can achieve when you truly have the freedom to focus. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can use code ADHD40 at checkout to get 40% off a Freedom yearly premium subscription. That site again is freedom.to with code ADHD40 for 40% off. All right, keep on listening to find out how you can start living right side out. All right, so I think one of the easiest places for us to start is, so you have your series Right Side Out. And in the beginning of the series, you talk about this story of wearing a shirt right side out versus inside out. And I think if you could tell that story, that might be a great way to set the tone of what we're talking about today.
It's funny, like I feel comfortable being in a setting where there's a understanding of ADHD. You don't always get that. I mean, it's rare. So it's funny because ADHD people probably have a lot of stories like this, where they're missing details, they're not paying attention to something, they get themselves into a bit of a pickle, so to speak. That happens to me a lot, so I have a lot of stories like that. One of them was, and this wasn't really my fault. One time, a few summers ago, me and my wife and kids were going to see my Aunt Sandy and her kids, just kind of like a family thing. And on the way there, she called me and she's like, hey, I forgot that today's the day that my church is having a memorial for grandma. And my grandma just passed within the year. And she's like, do you mind if we go there? Like, they're going to have a memorial for all the congregants that had passed that year. And I love my grandma and I'm not a monster. So I was like, yes, of course, that's fine. And I plugged into Google Maps the new address and we went to this park where her church was holding this event. And I went over to the little pavilion thing where all the families were, dropped off my kids and my wife, parked the car. And then as I'm walking over to the little overhead place, I get just a glimpse of the shirt I'm wearing. And I realized that I was in major trouble. It was actually the shirt that I was wearing. I just realized this is not the best memorial attire. And luckily I noticed it in time, jumped behind a bush, flipped it inside out, and the graphic was obscured and the crisis was averted. Now, the shirt had, like, the thing is, this is my favorite shirt. It's the first one out of the wash. It's the most me. And on it has a giant slice of pizza, which is great. I go by NEJ Pizza because I love pizza. Are you a pizza guy?
Yeah, I'm going to definitely be eating pizza after this. I was like, whenever I think about pizza, I want to have pizza afterwards. I was like, I'm just going to plan on this ahead of time.
That's good. You knew after this call you're going to be thinking about pizza. So yeah, I love pizza. I go by NEJ Pizza, and it's got a huge slice of pizza. Not super appropriate for a memorial, but not, not a deal breaker or anything. Unfortunately, the pizza is held by a giant skeleton hand, and that skeleton hand is coming out of the ground, and behind that skeleton hand is a gravestone that says "Rest in Pizza." Not great memorial attire. And I just had visions of being chased with pitchforks and the whole thing. And luckily, I flipped it before I got there. And even though that shirt is super me, I think that was the right thing to do. And I actually think masking, there's a lot of baggage with masking. There's a lot of baggage with not bringing your whole self to every place that you go. But everybody, neurotypical and neurodivergent alike, have to be able to accommodate situations. So I was happy to flip, no matter how me that shirt is, I was happy to flip the me inside out in that occasion to respect my grandma. And that was also kind of an experience I had my entire life, I realized. The more I thought about it, I realized, like, when I've showed up to kindergarten, my teacher was really quick to be like, whatever this is, like, turn that down. And so I would flip that self inside out. And that occasion, dinner table, Sunday school, first week of college, graduation, dates, all of that, flip, 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 flip. And I thought about how you do that long enough and you get tired of flipping your, jumping behind bushes and flipping your shirt inside out metaphorically all the time. And you pretty soon just flip it before you leave the house. And then eventually you're washing them that way and you're cutting out the tags and you've forgotten any of the reminders that you're not actually meant to wear this side out. You're actually supposed to live right side out. That story to me is kind of a reminder of how easy it is for me to make those accommodations for everybody else and forget all the stuff that's right underneath the surface that I'm hiding on the inside. And it actually, whenever I would have these safe spaces around ADHD, like I got interviewed for some illustration work that I did for this magazine for ADHD a few years ago. And in that setting where this was a celebratory space for being this way, I noticed I was being more myself than I'd been in years. And I thought, man, it's so scary how easy it is to forget that you're masking. That's the story we start the series on. And that's the idea of the right side out. We're talking about what does it look like to live right side out and why should we do that?
Being around other people thing is also reminding me of when I've gone to the ADHD conference that they have every year from Chad. You go there and you're like, nearly everyone here has ADHD. And it is.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, oh, everyone is just doing their own thing. And it's great because people are like, oh, yeah, I have not felt this free to be myself in such a long time.
Yeah. I started thinking about it like there's safe space to be yourself. And then there's celebration space. There's a place where you're actually, what makes you belong is that you're different and that's the thing we're celebrating. And I had that in theater in high school. It took me a little while to find that group. And then in art, like that's what makes you special is that you're different, not that you fit in. And so, yeah, finding those places have become really essential for me.
I was thinking about this recently too, with like all the times that I have done this when I didn't really need to, I was just the assumption of doing it. And so not showing up authentically. And then what's happening, I've realized, is I'll do that and I won't be forming any connections with these people because I'm not really being myself. And
because you're not really there.
Yeah, I'm just kind of flat, cutting things down. And so I'm not even being who they want me to be. I'm not being who I want to be. And it just is bad all around.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think I'm grateful that I have, in small doses when needed, the ability to pass as neurotypical for a half hour if I need to. Like that, I'm grateful that I have that, but it is scary how easy it is to slip into that to the point of forgetting who you are. As I grew up, I think that's kind of what happened to me. And I think it happens from an internalized, not just that you're different and you're embarrassed, but that what's different about you is actually a problem.
Yeah, there's like some maybe apocryphal accounts of how many times children with ADHD are corrected versus neurotypical children. And even with not having actual data for that, I'm like, that feels very accurate to me with just lived experience and like watching my own children and being like, oh yeah, how many times do I have to go and ask my child to go get their socks from upstairs? And then them being like, well, I forgot. And I'm like, well, this is why I'm reminding you. They're like, you don't have to remind me. I'm like,
But you forgot.
my parents were fairly good about my ADHD, I feel. But even though I was not diagnosed for until I was in my 20s, my parents used to just keep extra shoes in the car for me because of how often I forgot to get in the car with shoes.
That sounds about right.
That sounds like a good accommodation, but also that was definitely a clue. But yeah, and it's funny how we do end up with this, like, yeah, we're trying to be someone else. And we just can't find our way back to who we thought we were because it's been such a long time since we've been who we are. I know there have been times where I'm just like, oh, what do I even want? Who do I want to be? And it's like scary when I don't have that answer right in front of me. It's like, then question, like, is this something that people just innately know? And I am somehow broken not knowing this? Or is it something that I just really need to work for?
I like that idea of the t-shirts that, you're folding them away inside out. You're cutting out the tags. And eventually you're not even going to remember or much think about what was on the inside of this thing. And I think for me, when I started really thinking about that and started crafting that story, it came from that call that I had where I realized, like, how is it that I'm a full-time artist? My job is essentially to be myself professionally. And I'm still finding these experiences where a true unmasking feels completely foreign to me. And to the point of, I've forgotten what it feels like to be this free. And then trying to do it on command. That's a whole other thing. One of the other things that happened as I was doing this series, I did a lot of different research and reading. And, when I had that feeling, being interviewed and being celebrated for ADHD, or ADHD being celebrated, I got off of that phone call feeling euphoric. To the degree to which I felt like this doesn't feel like a personal experience. This seems so profound that this has to have some kind of precedent. There has to be some catalog, like something happened here. I'm very aware of that. So I started really trying to dive into finding any terminology of what is this feeling. And it was one of those rare times where you can't even quite Google it. I started getting into like research papers, which I, find very intimidating, but the odd time when I'm really desperate on a hyperfixation, I can get there. And I found this research from a guy, Dr. Ken Banau. He's a psychologist, and he did all this research on this exact experience. And he coined a term, and it's called pro-being pride. And it's the feeling of pro-being, meaning for being, pride. And it's the pride of your being, not necessarily being proud of something you did, but proud of the way that you are, and that you often encounter it when you're in the presence of somebody else enjoying your nature. He has kind of this research and theory around how it's extremely powerful in counteracting deep-seated shame. And so he actually appears later in the series, and there's a clip with him. I had a conversation with him. He's a really brilliant guy. But yeah, this pro-being pride thing, I thought, okay, this is the feeling. I have another person who's a researcher in the series named Angus Fletcher, who's an expert in story, has a PhD in Shakespeare, really interesting character who I am a huge fan of. And he connected this too, because as I was thinking about this celebration space, that was what I was calling the pro-being pride thing. I thought, oh, kind of what you said, but you actually clarified it. I thought, oh, I need to go be where all the ADHD people are. Like, that's what I need. I need to be where people are like me. But like you said, and everybody knows, it's kind of like what they say about autistic people, where if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Similar with ADHD. The thing that Angus Fletcher talks about is that feeling of self-acceptance and self-love is more likely to come from a space, not where everyone's like you, but where everyone's different, and that's what they celebrate. And the difference is appreciated, rather than the kind of spaces where differences aren't allowed if you're going to be part of this club or whatever. I started diving into it because it was such a profound feeling. Probably, I'm guessing most people can think about, when were you in a space where the person you were with just was appreciating your being. They just liked the way that you are. and how freeing and powerful that is.
Yeah. Remember a few years ago, shortly after like initial pandemic lockdowns, and I could start seeing people again and visiting with a friend and just chilling out at his house and just not, we weren't doing anything, but it was like, oh, but this is just great to be around these people where I don't feel like I have to do something. Because that's often what I find with like doing the masking is that I'm putting on some sort of performance, and that is exhausting.
Yeah, it's an acting rather than being. It's almost the opposite. I get very drained by most social engagements. It's difficult not to fall into the masking.
And I'm like sitting there thinking like now, like, is it that I'm an introvert, or do I spend so much time masking that it doesn't matter what my social experience is like? It's always going to be exhausting.
I think the same thing. I've had the same quandary. I've thought like, I think of myself as an introvert, but I often think, yeah, that's probably just masking, the tax of masking socially.
I do know if there's too many people, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be exhausted, but I have a lot of trouble with focusing on more than one conversation or having a number of people in a conversation, because the people are like, oh, you're so quiet. I'm like, yeah, I can't track everything. I'm always just catching up here.
Yeah, I can get like that. I can get like that if it's like, especially, if you're in a bar and there's TVs and there's other conversations in the vicinity like that, that's very difficult for me.
Yeah. Whereas like I'm trying to talk to my wife and my children are having their own conversation in the corner. I'm like, they're not really interrupting me, but wow, I cannot focus right now. And it's like, I'm like, they're being good. I shouldn't, but how do I communicate this? And I mean, that's one of the like funny things where you're like, I don't want to impose what's going on in my brain on everyone else. And so I think that's like kind of what a lot of the masking comes from. It's like, oh, I don't want to burden you with who I am, which saying out loud sounds awful, but is definitely learned from my like Midwest parents.
Yeah, it's interesting because, having neurodivergent people in my family and having friends that have totally different types of brains, I think a lot about what does it mean to accommodate, because what you just said is kind of a moving idea, like this idea, I don't want to burden other people with who I am. It moves me because I totally relate to that. And at the same time, there's a balance of that because I have autistic friends. We're cut from such different cloths. And I know there's certain ways I could be that are going to be extremely taxing on them and vice versa. And actually, the best way that we can be in friendship is making allowances and making accommodations. And so I think we're in this time where we're in this antithesis moment, this anti thing of what was before, where the neurodivergent people were forced to make all the accommodations to the neurotypical people or the way that society has built itself. And in that like pushback, what you get is this, no, we won't, we're not going to mask, we're anti-masking, whatever, not anti-masking in COVID way, but in a neurodivergent way. And I think I'm interested in how we move past that too, to get to a synthesis of there's an understanding that we're all different types of people. We need different accommodations. And just because this way that you've set up things is quote unquote normal doesn't mean that we all have to accommodate for that. That's what it is. We are accommodating for the normalcy of others, but not being so, I don't want to be anti-accommodations either, because how could I be if I'm asking people to make accommodations for me?
It is always tricky too when like things like overlap in weird ways. Cause like my wife has issues with misophonia where she's very sensitive to sounds. And my daughter likes to stim by singing to herself. And like, who are we going to accommodate here? Usually my wife, but
it's difficult. You have to find these different, and that's what I'm more interested in, a world where we have those conversations. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in saying everyone has to just deal with the way that I am,
Yeah, because there's like different things. Like, so yeah, often it's my wife being like, okay, you can't sing right now. But, other times it's like, oh, my wife's like, I'm going to put on my headphones because I need to focus on this. And you can keep doing what you're doing, but I can't be both listening to you and doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that Brené Brown spoke about, which I thought was really poignant. And she talked about how she would, when she gets home with her husband, they'll both say what percent kind of regulated they are, and they'll make accommodations based on that. So there are times where, your wife might be like, look, I just can't deal with this right now. Could you please just quiet down or go in the other room? And that makes sense. But yeah, it's that open communication around needs and preferences. And it's requires so much empathy because for me, I actually thrive in noisy for a lot of the time.
Actually remember hearing that same thing from Brene Brown. And it was one of those things where it like clicked with me like, oh, I need to communicate how I'm feeling because it's not always going to be clear that I'm at 10%. I'm just kind of like, it's like, oh, are you just staring off in space because you're thinking, or are you staring off in space because that's the way you're just disassociated and that's the way your brain's coping right now?
And you realize like, yeah, sometimes you and your spouse are both at 10% and there's nothing you can do but power through. That happens too.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago being like, hey kids, we're having snack dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
Go find something in the pantry.
Exactly. Got to call that sometimes.
One of the things I do love about ADHD is like this ability to go with the flow of things a lot of the times, because that is a kind of learned response from ADHD, I find, where I'm like, yeah, I have had so many times where things have gone sideways and I've just had to deal with it and then keep going. And it is, I think, a very great skill to learn to be like, oh yeah, things didn't work out how I wanted to, but now I'm going to do something else with it. That's one of the best ways to be creative for me too, is I'm like, oh, this didn't work, but now this is this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I can even see myself self-sabotaging at times just to create these novel experiences. Like that's the thing that comes to mind for me, where I would see, if there was a fire drill at school or whatever that threw off things, like nothing was better. And I realized like this is a novelty seeking nervous system where I'm like, I am excited when things go wrong or don't go the right way or whatever, just because it's different. And finding out stuff like that has really helped me navigate things. For instance, habits are so hard for ADHD people for so many reasons. And one of the things that I've realized is, the definition of a habit for neurotypical people is doing the same thing the same way and making it automatic. And I realized that I actually can't do that. I can do the same thing if I do it in a different way. And so for running, that's looked like I have to take the playlist for my run super seriously. It has to be totally juiced. I have to be like, oh, this song is hitting like hard. And that means taking it seriously, wasting time crafting these stupid playlists because I need that novelty. It makes me think of that. Like it does make you resilient because when the world goes upside down, there's a little part of you that's like, thank God I couldn't take another minute of the same old. It kind of makes you good in those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, I've known so many people with ADHD that are like, yeah, I shine in a crisis. It's like I finally have that stimulation to do all the things. Although I know people take it too far. They're like, I'm gonna always be in crisis. And then they're like, oh no, now I'm burning out. Can only do this for so long, apparently.
Yeah, unfortunately, I totally understand that.
A while ago, I did this episode on like the dichotomies of ADHD, where it feels like I need both a lot of structure, but I need a lot of novelty. I need to have the time to do something, but I also need to have a very strict deadline to do it. I need to know exactly what I'm doing, but not have someone tell me what I'm doing.
It does make you an annoying person to parent or have as an employee, because that's very confusing. But I feel that. And it's one of the reasons why I really love that phrase from Dr. Becky. She says, 2 things can be true. Mm-hmm. And I feel like so much of trying to find a working philosophy for how to move through the world with ADHD in a way that isn't a complete disaster means having that flexibility of mind, or being able to hold 2 things in tension, finding the tension of opposite ideas. Just like that thing I was saying, like doing the same thing in different ways. Like one of my kind of hyperfixations is philosophy, self-help, that kind of stuff. And I really love opposing philosophies. Sometimes I'll read books that are almost polar opposites. And I love them because I need both gears. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know the origin of it, but I heard this idea that you need 2 pieces of paper, one in each pocket. And one of them says, you are a piece of dust in the universe. You're completely inconsequential. And then on the other piece of paper, it says you're unique in all the universe and there's nothing as complex and amazing as you. And you need both of those pieces of paper. And you need to pull out which one you need at the different times that you need it. And I think that kind of dynamic movement through life is the only chance that ADHD people have. And it's exhausting, but it can also be kind of fun if you can dance with it or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's figuring out when you do need those two pieces of advice. Because sometimes I need this one, sometimes I need that one. And sometimes I'm not good at choosing which one I need at a time.
That is true. And the more dysregulated you are, the worse you are at choosing or being in touch with which one you need.
Yeah, because it can feel with the ADHD, the very black and white thinking where I'm like, oh yeah, this is how things are. And it's like, no. I mean, this is one of my funniest things when I'm like started working with this assistant producer person to help me get everything done. And I'll be like, yeah, I've decided that we're just going to change this thing. He's like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, I realized we don't have to do it this way anymore. And he's like, yeah, that's true. Great. And it was just like when I was like doing my newsletter, I was like, oh, I was doing it this way. And I'm like, this is just torture for me to get this done this way. And I'm like, oh, I'm the boss. I can change my mind.
Yeah. And not only that, and even more than that, one of the, like my wife watched me over the past 15 years change how I make coffee in the morning, probably 10 times. Like, I've gone through every type of process that there is. Right. And she being, the way that she is, she's like, what are you doing? Like, are you going to find one that you like? And that's where this idea of doing the same thing differently came from. Because I realized like, oh, I'm not looking for the way to do it. I'm looking for a new way because I'm sick of making coffee that way. Like I can't do it anymore. It's driving me nuts. I got to find novelty within this. And so instead of thinking, what I've adopted is instead of thinking, oh, this new way I'm doing the newsletter, that's the way. I have to realize like, no, this is what I want to do right now. It might not even be efficient. It might not even be effective. I just want to try this for now. And it's getting me to show up. So I'll trust it.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to try and embrace this fact that I'm like trying to think that I'm going to do something forever I've never had anything that lasted forever. I mean, I've only been alive for 39 years, so can't really predict forever. But in those 39 years, nothing has been that constant. So
yeah, I've learned to distrust that thought, actually, when that thought that comes and says, oh, all I have to do is do this forever. I'm like, okay, well, I already know that's a bad plan because I don't do that. I've got really good, I got really good for like 6-7 years of running every other day, running 3 miles. And I've just started to get out of it. And I think it's because I need to introduce novelty back into it. I can figure out how to do the same thing if I can do it in a different way.
Yeah, and I think that's often where people like stumble a lot is they will be like, oh, I have this way that I do my to-do list, but I can't get myself to do it anymore and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, just do it differently. You don't even have to do it a lot differently. Make it so like
No. Yeah, just introduce something that makes it feel a little bit juicy.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna just put a new column on here that says how much I like to do this thing. It's like taxes sucks. I'm like, oh, great.
Taxes are a trigger word, okay, Will? Don't be throwing that word around. That's like that. I've run my own business for 15 years. Mm-hmm. That right there is the bane of my existence.
Every year I think I'm going to get it.
Oh,
I haven't yet.
It's a nightmare.
I'm like, oh, I'm like, this year is going to be the year. And I'm like, and there's so many things with ADHD where I'm just like, oh yeah. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to stay on top of dishes and I'm never going to have to worry about them. The sink's going to be perfect. And then I get like everything put away. And then 2 days later, I'm like, how did this happen again?
The two things that have saved me, I really feel, one is the same thing I've said 1,000 times, the same thing differently, but also bundling, doing two things at once. That saved me, man. When I was a kid and my parents would make us mow the grass, the one time, and this is the thing, like I love finding out I was ADHD was so healing for me because, one of the things they talk about that I just felt like the worst person alive was boredom is physical pain. It is for me. Like I hate, I don't even want to say I hate that about myself, but I am prone to hating that about myself. It's a difficulty being a dad, being a husband, like doing so much is difficult just because of that fact. And, when I was a kid and they used to make us mow the grass, oh my gosh, I absolutely hated it. One time I faked falling down the hill with the lawnmower, faked an injury because I was like, oh, I can't do it. I can't. So I was just like, I have to get out of this. I can't do this anymore. And it wasn't until I realized like, oh, I can actually tape songs off the radio onto my tape and listen to all my favorite songs. And even all the way into adulthood, I would allow myself this accommodation of singing while I was mowing. So I'm listening to my favorite songs, singing at the top of my lungs. Looking back now, because I listen to podcasts now, so I don't have to do that. I kind of can't even believe, like I'm in my early 20s. My neighbors think I've completely lost it. But it's the only way I could get through it. So I have, all those different little audiobooks. That's why podcasts are the ADHD medium, is because it's the perfect companion to everything boring.
I spent so much time just being like, oh, I need to do something. Let's hop on a podcast, listen to some friends for a while, and we'll get something going. That or doing a lot more audiobooks the last couple of years. But
I think that's a trend, because I think podcasts kind of trained people how to listen to audio. And then the people that got super hardcore with podcasts needed like a next level. And audiobooks are so much more organized and concise. I still listen to podcasts, but I have different kind of go-to things, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks too.
Yeah, it's made me always be like, why are video podcasts so popular? I can't imagine watching a podcast.
It's kind of crazy. I know, it's kind of crazy. It makes me wonder if it's more of a neurotypical thing, or if it's like a background thing for ADHD. It's like extra stimulation. But it took me a long time to get on board with that idea for that same reason, because I use it so often in the car, mowing, doing the odd things around the house.
Yeah. When it also reminds me of how often I imagine that everyone thinks like me. And then I'll see things like people love video podcasts. I'm like, why? I don't love them. And then people are different.
Yeah, people are different. But also, I have this creative podcast. So I've done a podcast for 10 years about creativity. So I think a lot about, I'm an illustrator. So I think a lot about creative practice, how to be creative, best practices, that kind of thing. And this is one thing that you were saying, people are different and you're only thinking from your perspective, but creatively, I think that falls under this idea of taste, which I think is one of the most essential tools of being a creative person. Is really the only thing you have is your taste. You have that sensitivity. That's the thing that's going to help you make decisions and know what to do. And that's why until I started watching some podcasts on YouTube, I couldn't do the video portion, because I was just I just don't know what the appeal is. If I don't know it's how can you be a vegetarian and open a steakhouse? It just doesn't make any sense. You don't know what's good. You can't taste what you're making. So, I think it's a valid point.
Yeah. And it's one of the things where you go, oh yeah, people are different, and they're slow down and be curious, well, why do they like that so much? Maybe that they're consuming it in a different way. Because I was like, oh yeah, I'm not doing YouTube podcast thing and I just put it on the TV. That's better than putting on a movie. Because I know if I put on a movie, I'll sit down and end up watching it instead of cleaning. I don't think I'll sit and watch a podcast, but it might have that extra bit of oh, there's some people here. I've got a little bit of that accountability feel of, oh, people are here, they're talking, and we're cleaning together, even though they're not helping. Jerks.
I know. And I think that the other piece of it for me is that a lot of the stuff I listen to is kind of nonfiction, informational. And so, but what most people listen to is more entertainment stuff. Mm-hmm. And so the entertainment shows that I listen to, I prefer to see those too. And so I think there's some kind of, at least for my particular taste profile, there's something about comedy podcasts. I get why you want to see them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of acting out. There's a lot of, extra flair if you're watching it. But if you're listening to people talk about psychology or marketing or whatever, there's not a huge appeal there for me.
Yeah. Sitting there being oh yeah, how are you doing this differently? And what's the appeal? More often than not, when I'm I actually sit down and go oh, why would someone spend money to do that? This thing that I would never do. I'm oh, it's because you really love it. And there is a reason that you really love it. I think this also comes back to the point earlier we were talking about knowing what you want and being yourself, because it's hard to always visualize what other people want, and so that makes it so hard to try and be who you think they want you to be. Doesn't work. And why it's important to just be you. If they don't, they're not going to like who you're pretending to be, so don't bother that. If they don't like who you are, then nothing changed. The equation didn't shift. It was either they didn't want to hang out with fake you and they didn't want to hang out with real you. Well, that doesn't change how things go. Maybe you find someone that you do want to hang out with.
There's a metaphor in creativity that matches what you're talking about just in everyday life. When creative people do that, when they try to give people what they think they want, they call it pandering, because you think, oh, I'm so above the masses. I can see exactly what they want. I'm not even into it, but I know you're going to love this. That's kind of what masking is. It's kind of thinking that you know what these people want you to be and you can give them what they want. And the truth is, just like you said, rarely are you that successful. I mean, have you ever just like, yeah, there's sometimes where you've masked really hard and people really like you for that. And usually there's a whole bunch of other stuff wrapped up in that, but it rarely goes that well. You're not actually making a genuine connection.
And I mean, I found it's been so important in my journey as a podcaster. It's like when I am doing the episodes where the number one audience is the other me sitting out there, and I am writing towards this person who I feel needs to hear this information, that it is me before I started writing that episode. Those episodes do so much better because it's like, oh, I'm not writing for anyone else. I'm talking about the stories that I think are important to me, the facts that I wish I understood better. I'll like sit there and be like, oh, how do I explain this? And I'm like, oh, I thought I knew this way better than I did, but I can't. It's like, well, I'll be like, oh, that's been on the back burner for such a long time now because I haven't found a good way to do it, is talking about people like, don't just rely on habits, rely on systems. And I'm like, great, what's a system? Oh, that's complicated. Let's dive into this. And I spent hours and hours writing on this, and I'm like, I'm still not comfortable explaining this concept in a way that isn't overly abstract.
Oh, I get that totally. You know, the podcast I do tons and tons of monologue episodes, and that same thing has happened. Also, what ends up happening is you're like, oh, this is kind of I get an inclination of like, this could be an episode. And then you start diving into it. And you're like, wait, I don't understand this as well as I thought I did. You're doing research, writing, and you're like, oh, this is actually like 5 episodes. You know, that happens a lot too.
Yeah, I did one on like energy management that ended up like that, where I was just like, oh, this is complicated. And I could have gone way deeper. I'm fortunately now ahead in my episodes, and so I can spend a little bit more time on things, but it used to be like, okay, I need to write this and put it out the same week, and be like, oh no, I don't understand this as well as I thought, and I really have to figure this out.
I've been there. That's serious stress.
Yeah, there was times I'm like, okay, episodes come out on Monday, this episode's finished at Tuesday. Well, there's definitely times where I'm like releasing episodes day of, morning of, night before, and I'm so nice to now not be doing that. It feels weird because I'm like, I don't know how to just like, because I often have when people like interview me like, oh, how do you do this practice? I'm like, you just kind of get in the groove and you do it.
I think about this a lot because one of my oldest kid is a lot like me, and I realize like there are certain lessons that people like me can only learn firsthand, because the only way that I could learn to do a picture book on schedule or do a podcast ahead of time is to feel the pain of what happens when I don't. Because then you realize, oh, there is an urgency a month out. This actually is do or die right now. And the only way I can tap into, you know, that idea of like, you have this nervous system that is based on urgency or interest or whatever, only a few things really move the needle. I've had to learn the hard way a bunch of times what urgency looks like when you're working at a bigger scale. And that's how I ended up getting ahead. And we're not always ahead, but it's only because of so much pain, so much like, oh yeah, I'm back in this place that is the worst. It's not a place you want to create from.
I mean, sometimes you can get like great stuff from like, oh, my brain's just firing because it's like,
sure,
like
it needs to.
Yeah, it's like the need fuels what needs to happen. But yeah, oftentimes I'm like, I find that like the revision of what I've like when I do a monologue, I'll write an episode and then I'll like come and look at it again and be like, wow, that is awful. Let's rewrite that.
Yep, I've done that 1,000 times.
And it's I'm like, oh, it's so much better when I can give it the time to not just give that first effort. And while the first effort would have been fine and is what I would have turned in high school or college for like a paper, I'm like, I could have been such a better writer at that stage in my life, going through and doing the revision that needed to happen.
That's one of the things I loved about doing this show for 10 years is just spending a lot of time thinking about creativity and reading about it and getting into what researchers say about it. And one of the things that researchers around creativity, a phrase that comes up over and over and over again that you don't hear really much every day or with artists, you'll hear it in little pockets if you know to look for it. But it's one of the phases that they mark out in the creative process is incubation. And that's a thing that I didn't think about it for a long time. I didn't realize like it would happen accidentally, like what you're saying. Where you've left something, come back to it when you need to use it. You're like, oh, this actually sucks. But the interesting thing is when you go to rewrite it, you have all this subconscious help that your subconscious been working on this for the past however long you've left it. And I've heard Taika Waititi, the filmmaker, say that one of the favorite practices that he has when he can afford it is to write a script and then leave it for a year and then come back to it. And you just see it so fresh. You're not precious about it. And you have this benefit. Like so many times we're working on picture books or episodes, I have this thing where I write and write and write. I'm like, really, I know it's okay. There's something good here, but it's not great. There's something's missing. And I've worked so hard. I'm like, it's not there. This is just not going to be good. It's just not, it doesn't have it. Then I'll come back a couple of days later. I'm like, boom, there it is. It's useful to kind of have these things in your toolbox. So you're not doing it on accident, because for a long time, that's how I was doing it. I still do sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and for a long time, it felt like that was the right way to do it. Because I was like, oh, if I'm it's so easy to tap into this energy to get stuff done if I am doing stuff up to that deadline.
Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing. I can't remember what the 3 motivations of ADHD are, but I know it's interests and it's urgency. And I feel like there's one other one. But I think school probably, because for a lot of kids, it's not interesting. So that's not motivating. That's not a motivating factor. So they're pretty much just learning how to exist through urgency. That's the other thing about the novelty element of, doing a project, a picture book or a 10-year project with podcasts. I've also had to give myself a lot of permission to kind of go on tangents because I know this is at its best if I can allow myself to be led by curiosity and not urgency only.
Yeah. And it also tells me if I am being led by curiosity, this is something I really want to work on.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, this is a topic that I'm so interested in that's what's driving the work. It's not, it needs to get done, needs to get out the door.
That reminds me also of something we were talking about earlier where I was talking about the 2 things being true. There's a book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, and great book. It was really useful to me to think about. He talks about this atelic versus telic experiences, and atelic is a play on telos, which is goal-oriented. Atelic is non-goal-oriented, or where you're doing it for the experience, not for the destination. And so I've had to realize, in my creative career, there's a lot of dopamine's in the chase. And so I got so goal-oriented in my creative practice that I forgot that this is actually about enjoying making stuff. That's why I did it. You know what I mean? For me, this 2 things at once looks like realizing, yes, I see the appeal and the validity of an Oliver Burkeman's atelic experience where you're doing it for the experience of doing it. You're making the picture book because you want to make a picture book, not because you want to get on the New York Times or get the Caldecott or whatever. But for me, again, the 2 pieces of paper, that's what works best. If I can find something I'm naturally curious about that also has some kind of end goal, and I think of it like, can I pick a destination where the road trip will also be dope? I know that I'm going places that I want to be. That's where I try to set my target. It's not always easy, but I try to do the same thing with podcasting.
Yeah. This is also making me think of this concept from outdooring stuff where it's type 1 and type 2 fun, where type fun is fun where you're having fun while you're doing it, and type 2 fun is fun that you love that you have done it. So you go on this really difficult hike and you're like, I loved that I did that. I feel so good and I love it. But at the time it is awful. And that is, I find something I try and think about too with my work where I'm like, when there's that slog of well, I want to have gotten through this. Am I going to enjoy the end product? Am I going to enjoy what I've done? I'm like, okay, that can be motivating as well.
Absolutely. And I think I'm glad you brought it up that way. I really like that way of thinking about it. And I realize for me as a kid, or when I, with ADHD kids, I know, again, it goes back to this learning by experience. I know so many ADHD type people that do public speaking stuff, and they have a really difficult time planning, and, they want to wing it. And I get it. ADHD people tend to be good at winging it, right? But I had to learn the hard way, and eventually I would put so much work into really planning, really writing, really practicing, that the end result would be that, I think the type 2 one, as you're talking about, where it's yes, it wasn't fun leading up to it, but the high of doing it and pulling it off was so good that I could learn to do that again. I think it seems like, especially ADHD kids with the school, because school doesn't have a lot of those highs unless you're in like sports. They don't get that elation of, oh, I finished the test. Wow, all the studying was worth it. They don't care, or they just didn't do it. That's another thing I think about when I'm parenting. Like, how can I get them to realize that it's actually worth working for things? That's why I fell so hard I fell really hard in the goal-oriented stuff for a while, because I was really existing, getting all my dopamine from that. Once you learn that, it can be really, really powerful for ADHD people, I think, to figure out because, goals and resolutions and habits are such a challenge that for the longest time, I just avoided that stuff. And once I realized like, oh, this is a source of like happiness. This is a source of something that can keep me on the path. I got too far into that. I realized like, oh, now I'm never even enjoying every day. Like every day is part of the slog towards a future day. And it's difficult to balance.
Yeah. I remember I picked up I love doing daily planning, because it like allows me to do, if I do know what I'm doing, that I can make sure I'm not doing too much, and I can kind of try and balance things out. But I had one that had like, what's something fun you're doing today? And I was just like blanking on writing that. I'm like, oh no, I need to figure this out.
Change your life.
Like if I can consistently not find something that I'm going to be doing that's fun in my day, that's not a life I want to lead.
No, it reminds me of, I can get into that spot because I can get into these like hyperfixation meals where I'm like, oh, I'm eating this every day. And the reason I'm eating that every day is because there's something about the combination of that's really hitting me in the way that I need. Like in terms of, I don't know, whatever the chemicals are, but I'm like, okay, that's working. And so I get so in a rut, that groove becomes a rut where all of a sudden now I'm like, I can't be open to anything else because this is where I used to get that thing. And so that's another area where studying creative stuff has really helped me, because the key to creativity is openness to experience. That's the like technical term that they use. And it is exactly what it sounds like, which is openness to experience. And I have to realize, like, when I get into those days where I look at my days and I can't think of anything, not just today, but for the next 5 weeks, I'm like, I don't even know. None of this sounds fun anymore. No, this meal isn't doing the trick anymore. Like, I have to realize, like, oh, it's because I've like locked in. I've lost my openness, and I have to be willing to be like, I'm going to try some new shows. I'm going to try some new albums. I got to, just be open for a while, knowing that a lot of it's not going to be good. A lot of it's not going to be fun. But again, I have to find that novelty. That's what makes ADHD feel like an adventure, is that you're never staying stagnant. You always have to evolve. Because you just bleed everything till it's dry, man. Like I really can take the fun out of stuff.
Which is such a funny thing about ADHD. Is you're like, yeah, I'm going to just beat this joke until it's done. And then I'm going to keep going for a while. And
I'm going to use this song until I don't ever want to hear it again.
Yeah. Yeah. When I had my like Spotify Wrapped, it was like, you were, for one of the songs, was like, you were in the 0.00045% of listeners. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Same thing happened to me with Elden Ring. I put like 300 hours on it, did the whole DLC, was obsessed with it, just like could not get enough, and then got to the final boss of the DLC, and I'm like, no, I don't care anymore. It's
so weird when I'm like, yeah, I've done everything except for these last two things, and I just
can't do it.
I feel like I should go back and finish, but
there's nothing left for you there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I had so much fun talking to
you.
Feels like I got a kindred spirit here with everything. I'm just like, oh yeah, that. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
Same to you, man. This is great. It feels like that celebration space. It feels like a good space to just let it kind of fly. And I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me. I'll just say one more thing, which is the conclusion of the right side out thing. The ADHD diagnosis was huge for me, not for any other reason other than self-acceptance. Is that it made me realize that, I got past the diagnosis, past the disorder, and realized neurodivergence is about embracing these parts of yourself, and that running for myself wasn't helping. And so in my creative life, it's really hard to be an artist if you hate who you are. It's really hard to be an artist if you're trying to be someone else. Like, that's the whole idea. Art is self-expression. And you're not going to love that expression if you hate the thing it's an expression of, which is you. And so that was a huge thing for me. Like this idea of you're a good thing to cultivate. Like the answer is to cultivate it, not to overcome it. And that shift right there, that was the biggest philosophical shift in my worldview in my entire life. And it's the reason I did that series was because I actually think the prevailing point of view in modern society is the right thing to do is hate yourself enough to change. Mm-hmm. And that is toxic and it doesn't work.
There's been no amount of negative self-talk that has ever actually spurred me to do something good.
No.
If people want to find out more about your work, Creative Pep Talk and all that.
I call it Creative Pop-Tart sometimes. It's Creative Pep Talk. That podcast is anywhere. It's for creative practices, being creative. If you are a creative person and you want to have a creative practice, I have a little PDF called The Creative Career Path that you get when you sign up to the newsletter at andyjpizza.substack.com. And it's just it's basically a tool for thinking strategically in your creative career or just being creative about how you approach career. So yeah, you can check that out on my Substack.
Awesome. And we'll get all that in the show notes because I'm sure people are going to want to go check this out because it got some really great stuff. So
thanks, man. Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me. I was really pumped to talk to you and get to be in the ADHD space.
Yeah, this was so much fun. Thanks again to Andy for coming on the show, and thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end. Be sure to check out Andy's podcast, Creative Pep Talk, and I'll be sure to include links to the show notes to that Right Side Out series that we talked about during this episode. Before you go, though, let's do a quick rundown of today's top tips. 1. Masking isn't inherently a bad thing, but it certainly is when we're doing it all the time and unconsciously. We want to be intentional about when and why we're masking and aim for authenticity when possible. 2. It's okay to embrace opposing truths. We need structure and flexibility, goals and play. We don't have to fall into all or nothing thinking, and this can help us balance some of these ADHD contradictions, which, when analyzed further, actually go together quite well. 3. Celebrate differences, don't just tolerate them. Safe spaces are good, but celebration spaces, where your uniqueness is actively valued, are better. Look for relationships or communities where people enjoy your way of being, not just what you can do for them. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Feel free to connect with me over at hackingyyouradhd.com/contact. Or you can find me on Blue Sky at hackingyyouradhd. If you'd like links or to read this episode's transcript, you can go to the show notes page at hackingyyouradhd.com/221. If you'd like even more Hacking Your ADHD, be sure to sign up for my newsletter, Any and All Distractions, which comes out every other week. In it, I give out my best distractions of the week, be what I'm reading, what I'm playing, or what I'm watching. I also try to give a few bits of actionable advice in each newsletter. If that sounds like something you're interested in, head over to hackingyyouradhd.com/newsletter to sign up. I also wanted to let you know about our Patreon that you can easily find at hackingyyouradhd.com/Patreon. We're going with a pay what you want model, meaning that all levels of the Patreon will receive all the same stuff. You can pay $0 or $2 or $10, and it's all the same. The only real difference coming from the roles that are assigned on the Hacking Your ADHD Discord. Which reminds me that I also should talk about that Hacking Your ADHD Discord, which you can get access through from Patreon, which again is pay what you want. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, you can come check out the Discord or the Patreon by going to hackingyyouradhd.com/Patreon and signing up. And also, don't forget to go subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/@hackingyyouradhd. And finally, if you'd like to support the show, the best way you can do so is to tell someone about the show, especially if you think a particular episode would resonate with them. Just click the share button on your podcast player. I'd also like to remind you that this episode was brought to you by Freedom. This is the kind of partnership that has always made sense to me because the best partners come from products that I've already been using for years, products that I trust. And while there are a lot of apps out there that can help block out distractions on the web, Freedom has always been hands down the best one I've ever used, and it's the reason I bought a lifetime membership already. That's right, they can't even tempt me with free premium because I'm already a lifetime member. With just a few clicks, I can block distracting websites and apps across all my devices, ensuring that my focus stays on what I really want to. Whether I'm working on a new podcast episode or deep diving into research, Freedom's comprehensive blocking capabilities let me tailor what I'm focused on. It's one of those tools that I can set and, well, not exactly forget, because when I try and log on to one of those blocked websites like Blue Sky or Reddit, the site will be blocked and I'll get the message, "You are free, enjoy this moment." which is a great reminder because generally my initial reaction is, ugh, but I was trying to procrastinate. But because those distractions are blocked, I get to move on and follow through with what I was actually intending on doing. Freedom is available for free with basic features, but also has a premium subscription option which unlocks more advanced features like scheduling, locked mode, and unlimited sessions. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can use code ADHD40 at checkout to get 40% off a Freedom yearly premium subscription, but feel free to try out the basic version first. So go check it out at freedom.to and discover what you can achieve when you truly have the freedom to focus. That site again is freedom.to, code ADHD40. And now for your moment of dad. What kind of pizza does the Dalai Lama order? One with everything.